When I am on the road, which is every single weekend, and when I'm doing a concert, Rochelle is praying and asking that the Holy Spirit would touch the hearts of people and bring souls to the kingdom. But I have to tell you that I was afraid of marrying Rochelle. Because you see, for 11 years, Rochelle had been a professional women's football player. You laugh, but it's true. Which is why I was afraid. She was a linebacker. Not just a cornerback, she was a linebacker. As well as a running back. As a running back, she rushed for 14,000 yards in 11 8-game seasons. She was a 2-time Super Bowl equivalent champion and MVP. Her signature move on the field was the stiff arm. Yeah, and I experienced this stiff arm off the field, if you know what I mean. And it was when I saw this picture that I was afraid for my life. And I thought, am I going to be number 86 if I do something she doesn't like? So before we got married, I made a promise to the Lord that I have kept to this day, 5.5 years, that I would always do everything she says. And these have been the best 5.5 years of my life, as I mentioned. When we were talking about the wedding, and she said, honey, could we get married at the beach? I love the beach. I wish I could live at the beach. I said, baby, no worries, you got it. And when I'm home during the week, and she says, darling, the dishes are dirty, the trash needs to be taken out, the floors need to be swept up, I say, baby, you don't have to say another word, I got it. Because I believe in the expression, happy wife, happy life. Yes. And God has blessed us so much in so many ways, but probably our biggest blessing has been our biggest surprise. Because in the last year and a half, we have become parents of a puppy. We don't have time for kids right now. So our puppy Aria is a great blessing and brings us a lot of joy and brings Rochelle quite a bit of company while I'm gone. And you know, for those that have pets, how you grow to love these creatures and they become just like family. And like children, they grow up so fast. 3 months ago, I went to Australia to go on a little tour. And the day after I arrived, Rochelle called me to tell me that Aria had just started taking driving lessons. So, there you go. All of us, I want to encourage everybody here to remember as we leave this place and start a new calendar year that all of us can do something for the glory of God. And sometimes we can have an effect on people and we don't even realize it. I went to college or university at Loyola, University of Chicago, where my family lived for several years. And I remember that I didn't know anybody there. I had gone to small Christian schools, and Loyola had like 15 or 17,000 students. So I was a little afraid the first semester, kind of, you know, learning my way around and so forth. And I didn't really do a whole lot, but one day I got an invitation from one of the professors who knew that I played the violin and said, Jamie, every year we have a talent show here at Loyola in November. And I'd like for you to play your violin. And I thought, well, that sounds cool. Maybe I could even, you know, break the ice and get to know some of the students here. And so I chose the piece. It was a classical piece. And began to practice it. And the night arrived. It was the third Thursday in November, so just 1 week before Thanksgiving. And I remember when I got in my car that night, as I turned on the ignition, the radio was on, and a weatherman came on with a special news bulletin. You know that Chicago is a pretty cold city, and in fact known as the Windy City. And I remember the guy saying, tonight, folks, is going to be very, very, very cold. Be careful out there. With the wind chill factor, tonight is going to get down to about 20 degrees below zero. So I made sure that the heat was working, and I cranked it up and all that. And I started on my way to school, and I arrived there about 40 minutes later, which is how long it took. And I found a parking spot as close to the entrance of the auditorium where this talent show was going to take place as I could. And I parked there. Normally I didn't do this. I would park in one of the satellite parking lots because I didn't want anybody to see my car. You see, I told people that I had a vet, but I didn't tell them that my vet was a Chevette, not a Corvette. When I tell this part to young people, they look at me like, They don't know what a Chevette is, but you know what it is. It's about the cheapest car you could have 30 years ago. And so I get out of the car, go up the stairs, into this auditorium that was beautifully decorated, about 400 chairs set out, elaborate stage, lighting, all that stuff. I go to the engineer and I give him my cassette with my accompaniment track, okay? And it wasn't one of those cassettes where each song was in one cassette. I had like an hour's worth of tracks there, so you had to rewind it and get it just right. And so I told him what needed to be done, went over some instructions. I saw how students started coming in, and at 7 o'clock when the program started, the place completely filled up with young people ready to have a good time. And have a good time they did. In fact, independent of what was going on up front, they had a good time. They laughed, they joked. Sometimes they didn't pay attention. Sometimes they booed the talent on stage, which wasn't very good, I must say. But as the evening progressed, I started to get worried. Because you see, most of the music being performed that night was not the kind of music I play. It was this loud, thump, thump, thump kind of rock music. You know what I'm talking about? These young people looked differently than here I was clean-cut, dressed. These young people had ripped jeans and T-shirts, pink and purple fluorescent hair. One young man had so many rings in his face that he looked like he'd been mugged by a staple gun. And so I'm thinking to myself, there's no way I'm going to get up there and play. They're going to boo me off the stage like they've done with one of the comedians. And so I went up to the priest that had invited me and I said, "Sir, I just don't want to play here tonight. I don't feel comfortable. I don't think they're going to like what I'm going to do because it's too different." And he says, "Listen, Jamie, it's because you're different that they're going to love you, I promise." And I'm thinking to myself, I'm too different here tonight. And so I get backstage because he said, "You don't let me down. Your name is in the program. You promised me." And I didn't want to let the gentleman down. So I get backstage and I go through my little routine where I pray and I take a few deep breaths and then I try to, relax my neck and this and that. And then I'm about to go on stage as the MC begins to introduce me. Now, I told this gentleman, when you introduce me, please introduce me as Jaime Jorge. Now, my name is Spanish. Si hay alguien aquí que habla la lengua del cielo, anybody here tonight? You have no idea what I just said. That's all right. For those that speak Spanish, my name in Spanish is Jaime Jorge. But when I arrived in this country and people began to call me Jaime, Yami, Jorge, Yorkie, Gorgie, I said, "No más." And I went to Jaime Jorge. So unless you can say Jaime Jorge, please call me Jaime Jorge. And I had told this young man to please introduce me as Jaime Jorge, but I think he was eager to try out the half a semester of Spanish he had taken in kindergarten. Because he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome our next participant, a freshman violinist by the name of Jaime Jorge." And I was so embarrassed when I heard those words. The first thing I thought was, what are the girls going to think of me with a name like that? And so I get up on that stage and I'm having a hard time. Because everybody's looking at me. They had been talking, and all of a sudden everybody just kind of quiets down and looks at me like, what is that up there? And I get up there and I close my eyes because I thought, if they're going to throw tomatoes and eggs at me, I don't want to see this coming. And so I close my eyes and I begin to play this piece, this classical piece. It starts out very slow, very passionate, very intense, but very boring for some people that don't like classical music. And I thought to myself, if I could just get from the slow, boring part to the fast, interesting part, everything is going to be okay. The more I played, the more they quieted down. I didn't know if this was good or bad because I had my eyes closed. I just kept on playing, right? And so I finally get to the part that goes faster and faster and faster. I mean, my fingers are just flying up and down and around the fingerboard. And then the middle part is very melodic. I play 2-3 strings at the same time. And then I play these delicate notes called harmonics. And then I go back to playing really, really fast. And I finish the piece in a flurry. And I go up and I play an arpeggio that goes up to the highest note you will ever hear a violin play. So high that one time I was in another state doing a concert. I'm not going to say where, Idaho. And at the beginning of the concert, a blind man walked in with his guard dog. And the guard dog laid down on the aisle and went to sleep. And he slept through the entire concert until I played this very last note. And then all of a sudden, the dog woke up. And when he figured out where this horrible noise was coming from, he started charging up the stage. And when he couldn't get any further, he squared himself, he jumped at me, and he went, "Ah!" Thankfully, there were no dogs at Loyola that night. And when I finished, I didn't know what to expect, but what happened was something I'll never forget as long as I live. Because as I began to play, I began to open my eyes, finished playing. The lights, the bright lights, the spotlights were blinding me. The perspiration was burning me, so I couldn't really see people. I could see their legs. And everybody was jumping up to their feet. And my first thought was, uh-oh, I'm dead meat. These people are going to kill me. But no, nobody got up out of their seats. They began to clap, to cheer, to yell, to scream. And I didn't know what to do. I froze, and I smiled, and I waved, and I bowed, and I did this a couple of times. And then I just walked off the stage, and they kept on going. And when I got to the end of the stage, one of the guys back there says, "Dude, you have no idea. This has never happened before. Go back out for another curtain call." So I get to the middle of the stage, and when I get to the middle of the stage, I hear something I have never heard before. Somehow, all of these young people had become a choir, and they were all chanting my name in unison. Jaime Jorge, Jaime. I didn't know if to laugh or cry. For weeks after this, as I would walk around the campus, young people would recognize me and they'd say, "Aren't you Jaime Jorge?" And I said, "No, I'm not." The point of my story is that you never know who is watching. I had several young people who approached me and said, "What is it about you that is different?" And I had the opportunity to share with them that Jesus was my best friend. And I served him. And they began to learn about Jesus Christ. And they accepted the gift of salvation. 20 years later, I went to Florida. I remember the Sunday morning, I was at the First Baptist Church of Longwood, just outside of Orlando. And I shared my testimony. And at the end of the concert, the service, a young lady came over and she said, "Jamie, you don't know who I am. But I was there the night that you played that violin. I was blind. I had a tumor in my brain. And the next day I had a surgery. And the doctors had told me I had a 50-50 chance of surviving that surgery. And all I could remember as I went into the operating table the next morning was the young man that had played this music that was so different than everybody else sang and played that night, that I prayed and said, "God, if you allow me to come out of this place alive, I want to be different like that young man." And she said, "Here I am standing in church today." For many people, you and I are the only Jesus